One. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Real Talk with G-R.E.A.L. Of course, my name is Duran, and I'm here with my partner, Paul. And as you see, we have a very special guest in the building with us today, our very own pastor, Pastor G-R.E.A.L Roundtree II. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you all for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is the perfect time because in April, by the time this airs, this will be right before the anniversary on the third Sunday. So we wanted to take this time to introduce some of the newer people of Mount Zion to our pastor, and just kind of get a little bit of information from him so you can know your leader. That's important. I was just telling them before we started filming, Jethro, we're not calling him Jethro, so
they calling me Jethro.
We're not calling him Jethro.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Jethro.
I'll let him finish. Let me tell you how he just tried me. Go ahead.
So Jethro is the father-in-law of Moses,
who was 80. Moses was 80.
Moses was 80.
So Jethro was his father-in-law. You do the math. But I'm Jethro.
We just talking about on a spiritual level, not age level. But he gave Moses some very important insight on how to be able to lead the people, how to be able to spread the what's the word I'm looking for? Responsibility. There it is, out amongst other people. And then Elisha had the prophet Elijah, and then we know in the New Testament, Timothy, his father in ministry was Paul. So what better way than to get our leader, our spiritual father here, just have a quick conversation and just go and see where it goes. So I guess I'll lead off with the questions. First things first, how long have you been preaching? Not pastoring, but how long have you been preaching?
I've been preaching since 2001. So what is that, 23 years this year? July 29th, 2001 was my first message.
What was that like? I know me and Paul, we've already kind of discussed what our calls were kind of like. So if you care to share, how did you know that God was leading you and calling you into ministry?
I do not have a supernatural, celestial impartation story. Didn't happen. I didn't have the Gideon story where fleece was dry one side and wet the other side. I didn't have that. It was just a knowing, an inner sense of knowing from a child. And the older I got and tried my rascalities out in those streets, it just never fit. And I knew I didn't belong. And the call kept pulling me back. And it was after I had gone through a series of unfortunate decisions that led to some pivotal moments in my life that I had to make a decision. Am I going to keep trying to live life on the fringes, or am I going to take life seriously, take God seriously, and do what he called me to do? And so I made my submissive statement in Tallahassee, Florida, while I was attending Florida A&M. And a few months later, I preached my first sermon, Loose Him and Let Him Go, the story of Lazarus. And on that Sunday and that Saturday, 6 days later, I married the love of my life. So my life changed dramatically in 2001.
It's a quick change. It's
Yeah.
a really quick change.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we know, you grew up at the Greater St. Paul, is it
Missionary Baptist Institutional Church of Lakeland, Florida, Incorporated, 1130 North Webster Avenue, Lakeland, Florida, 33805. Reverend Dr. N.S. Sanders.
I was just getting ready to say, under the leadership of Reverend Sanders. So I guess we can go a little bit deeper. We'll just kind of go around here. So, Paul and I, we have that relationship with you where, we call you Pop. We have that. So what was your relationship like with your pastor, and how did that help you in your latter years as a pastor?
My relationship with my pastor was warm, but much more formal than ours is. We didn't call him Pop. We call him Reb, R-E-B. And as much as he was and is my father in ministry, there was a significant age gap. And quiet as this is kept, I'm not as old as my pastor is in relation to the gap between me and him and me and them. They trying to make it sound like I'm, Jethro.
Wow.
But the reality is,
I shouldn't have used that.
I'm not that much older than that. And so that feeds into it because there's a little bit more. There's less of a generational divide. My pastor was born in 1934. You know, so he was 44 when he dedicated me.
Wow. Yeah.
When I was an infant, and so that was that generational disconnect. But as it relates to, there's certain principles in ministry and godliness that are timeless,
Right.
and those are the things that I was able to glean from him. How seriously he took the word of God, how he approached the ministry with a level of respect and reverence.
Right.
You know, wasn't no for N.S. Sanders to dress down. First of all, it wasn't happening on a Sunday. That just wasn't gonna happen. A dress down Sunday for my pastor was a suit with no vest. He wasn't going 3-piece. That was it. And so I may not practice all of those things verbatim, but I did learn how to hopefully approach the role with a dignity and a respect to God, and to not use ministry as a platform for self-promotion.
Right.
You know, not with the flashy suits and gaudy jewelry and lofty ideals that are more to impress than to impact.
Right.
So he set those indelible marks in my life and in a lot of my peers in ministry.
So 23 years preaching, I believe 14 years pastor, 11 years here at New Mount Zion.
It's pretty good. Yeah. It took me a minute. Yeah.
Can you talk about that transition from starting to preaching to your first pastorate and then transition to New Mount Zion?
That's
good. Google it, Moogle.
That's good.
Let me try to make this as terse as possible. Called into ministry 2001. I grew up, everybody called me Bishop. That's what my pastor nicknamed me. I was a church boy. I mean, I love me some church. Like other kids love jump rope and football, I love church. I would go while Red was preaching some Sundays. I would sneak up to the choir robe room and put on an adult choir robe and direct in the mirror. Cause that's, I mean, and my mom was a deaconess. So back in them days, the deaconess would come in on Saturdays to prepare for communion.
Right.
Commune. On first Sunday. And you know, when you had them little packets,
right,
them little dry freezer seal, you know,
Welch's.
styrofoam and sour grape juice we got now. We had that Welch's, you know, and you had the little top that had the little spout on it that you had to fill up each little glass individually, and them little oyster crackers. So when they were back there, her Miss Alice would be filling the communion cups. I'd be in the church sitting in a rail chair, you know, playing the pastor.
I remember those things.
You know,
I was just getting ready
be up
to
there
say
at the pulpit acting like I was the pastor. So it was in me. And then when I started preaching, I served my pastor very, very faithfully. I carried bags, I poured water, I drove for him, and I didn't mind doing it. I loved it. I loved to be able to serve him at that capacity. I was ordained 5 years later, 2006, and then quick backstory. I told you it's gonna be quick, but you know when people say long story short, it's actually long story longer.
Right.
Well, I had gone to preach. I was supposed to preach at this church, this little tiny church out in the sticks. I knew the church because a guy who used to be a minister at our church was the pastor. So we would go every year for his anniversary. So this particular year, he invited me to come to preach a special service on a Sunday afternoon. And I'm at the church, at my home church, talking to my pastor, just running my mouth, shooting the breeze. I'm like, oh, Reb, I gotta go. He's like, they probably won't start on time. Y'all better not show this to Reb. Y'all better not show this video to Ned Sanders. Anyway, he said, I'll be all right. Well, it wasn't all right. And when I got there, the pastor was up preaching. And he looked at me, and I felt horrible. And he looked at me, and he could see the dread on my face. He's like, and he starts talking to me from the pulpit. He's like, I'm sorry, preacher. I tried to wait on you, but the program had to go on. He said, but don't worry, you'll be back. Well, that had deeper implications than either of us understood at the time. Because about 2 years later, He was no longer there, and that church called my home church looking for pulpit supply, preachers just to come fill in while they go through their process. So we had several preachers at Greater St. Paul, kind of like we do here. So when they called my pastor, he's like, yeah, we need a preacher for Sunday. He said, well, which one you want? And they say, that little one. He was supposed to preach here a couple of years ago. He never got to preach. And lo and behold, I started going to fill in for them. I was prideful. Man, was I president of the Roundtree fan club.
Yes, sir.
I just knew when I showed up to preach for this little country church, they were just going to be falling over me like, oh, come please be our pastor. Come by here, help us out his little church. They was like, did a good job.
And that's it.
And I hit the road. And so I came for several months. And nobody ever was like, hey, bro, you interested? So finally, I prayed about it, and I submitted my name, gave it to the deacon. Whatever you want to do with this, do it. And it came to pass that they called me to be the pastor there, and I was there from May 09 until February 2013.
Okay.
And around that, in 2012, I started to get that little uncomfortable feeling like, God, I feel like I'm finna move, but I don't really know where, and I didn't want to just send out blind resumes.
Right.
So I said, well, maybe I'm supposed to start a church. So I started looking over in the Orlando, East Kissimmee area for places, talking to pastors who had started churches. I found a place, and I had a name.
Yeah.
The name was Redeemed Missionary Baptist Church.
Missionary Baptist.
You know it's gonna be missionary.
Yeah,
Baptist.
gotta be missionary
I'm
Baptist.
a Baptist brother. And so as I was going through that, I got a call from a friend of mine who had said he had been talking to my pastor, and my pastor said, you know, if the folk at Antioch, excuse me, if the folk at Antioch didn't love Bishop so much, I'd tell him to put his name in at Mount Olive. And so when he called me and told me, I said, Mount Olive? Why that thing blinking?
Oh, that's not the battery, is it?
It might be.
Oh, Lord.
It ain't plugged up, Paul?
Oh, and I forgot to plug.
You know, good help hard to find people. Listen, let me tell y'all something. You got the best equipment in the world. You can have the greatest connections, but you need people to connect. You understand what I'm saying, people? I'm trying to give y'all some gems right now. I need y'all to hear me out, okay? Find you some good, reliable people, and the rest will be history. Back to you, Jim.
So that's an every day, every Sunday. If y'all are ever wondering what we're doing in here, getting some life lessons. Point blank period.
I tries all I can, because, you know, I had two remarkable male influences in my life. First of all, my father, who's still the preeminent male influence. He showed me godliness, what it meant to be a good husband and father. But then I had my pastor. And I just feel like that's the least I can do.
Yeah.
You know, if people are willing to listen, I'll talk. And I will be uncomfortably honest, because it takes that. If I'm so busy trying to polish my history to be revered, then you're losing the essence of the testimony.
Right.
That through a messy wretch, God can still work great ministry. Yeah.
I know while Paul's doing this, just more of a deeper dive. You mentioned growing up Missionary Baptist. You mentioned having your dad and your pastor. And I know we've talked about it. We have a lot of similarities as well. I'm not going to go too much into that. But how was... No, you're okay. How was that that balance? How was that balance for you? Like, okay, so my pastor wants me to go here, but I also don't want to neglect my family. How did you find that balance?
I failed miserably. I was so enamored by ministry and by the heroism that I applied to my pastor that every other relationship paled in comparison. And I wasn't there, teenager, young 20s. I didn't even consider the impact that was having on people who loved me, who had sacrificed for me, who had poured so much into me. But because I was so transfixed with this man and the image he represented, and it's not his fault, it was me. It was years later that my father and I had a kind of come to Jesus conversation about that, and I realized, it was years later when I realized how hurtful my misprioritization had been to my father, and then even later to my wife and children, because I was always up under G-R.E.A.L, and I thought, the closer I stayed to him, the more accelerated my ministry career would be. And I knew the story of David, but I didn't really understand the godness of David's story. The fact that, this young brother was nowhere near where the action was.
Right.
He didn't even know that Samuel was at his house.
Yeah.
He didn't know that God had sent him there. He didn't know that somebody in his family was getting ready to be anointed to be the next. He didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
He was diligently working in the pasture.
Yeah.
And while many of us, and myself included, suffer from FOMO, fear of missing out, David was faithful. And so when all these other guys passed before David, in today's
Samuel.
Society,
Passed before Samuel.
what I said?
David. It's
Let me
always
tell
good
y'all
to have a
something.
young
Find you
mind.
some young men who are
Yeah.
respectful, who just won't interrupt you when you're flowing. You understand? That's what I'm trying to say. You need some non-flow breakers. All right, back to our regularly scheduled programming. But thank you. Samuel was there, and if it was in today's society, we would get anxiety because if we found out that the kingmaker was somewhere and we weren't there.
Right.
We didn't get tickets to the conference. We weren't invited to be one of the 7 last sayings preachers.
Right.
We're not on the revival circuit, and so we're going to get overlooked and passed over. But that story resonates and emanates the fact that God, if his call is on you, God will stop the party
Yeah.
till you get there.
Yeah.
Like he told Samuel, like, this ain't none of them. So Samuel's like, well, we ain't eating till your other son get here. Everybody else had disqualified him. Like, it can't be David. I mean, come on, David. Come on, really?
The run of the bunch.
Yeah. But God said, that's my man. And David didn't have to be somebody's yes man or sycophant. David wasn't up to 3 a.m. watching people clothes on YouTube. David wasn't spending rent money to go to conventions. David wasn't taking time off his job to go to a conference. I'm not judging this. I'm talking about stuff I did that was just ill-timed because I had a family. That should have been my priority at that time. But I was making ministry the priority under the rules that if rules, R-U-S-E, that if this works out, then my family comes up.
Right.
And being too ignorant and prideful to understand that the more energy I poured into my family, ministry wouldn't matter as much.
Yeah.
Not that this doesn't matter, but it wouldn't define me.
Right.
And as long as I had the respect and the love of those people I came home to every night, then church, okay, that's cool. But if not, I got somewhere to go when I leave this convention.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it took a while. It took a while. But yeah, with that whole dynamic, I did not do it right, and which is why I will not allow y'all to spend too much time around me. Paul is newly married. I send Paul home. Go home to your wife.
Plenty times.
Go home, Paul.
That's the priority. And if they want to stay here and talk, I'm going home to mine. I'm going home to mine zone. Show live. And so you got to continue to work that, because the ministry itself, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm starting to preach, can become an idol.
Yeah.
The very thing you're supposed to be doing for God can become a God to you when you approach it from the wrong perspective.
Yeah.
So that's a long way to answer that. Always make sure you honor the people who went hard for you in the paint. Don't ever neglect to honor your parents. If you're married, always prioritize time with your spouse. I promise you, there are going to be more conventions, there are going to be more conferences, there are going to be more revivals, but you got one time to get this thing right. And so, put it in order, brothers.
You actually mentioned something, since we are a young adult group, most of your young adult life was preaching, marriage, children, and pastoring. So what advice would you give to not even just young preachers or young pastors, but young adults in church?
Man, don't allow church to rob you of a relationship with God. Sometimes we can be so church centric. You know, we got to sing at the concert. You know, we got to go to the programs and all this kind of stuff. When you're young, of course, prioritize God. And yes, I'm a strong advocate of being a member of a church where you can grow and you can serve. But you got to have a life. Like, you know, if you got a relationship with somebody and they're gonna get mad at me. Yeah. But if it's church anniversary banquet night and it's your anniversary, I'm gonna see you up in this life center. Take that woman out. We done had 122 of these things. Yeah. And if the Lord delays, we'll have some more.
Right.
And so it's about balancing that thing. And as a young adult, you know, there's a lot of stuff I don't fully understand because, like you said, I didn't have an adult life without being a preacher, a husband, and a father immediately. When I preached my first message, I was 22. I got married 5-6 days later at 22. We had 3 children in our wedding at 22. I'm 45 now. That means for 23, I've been a preacher. Wow, I'm just not figuring this out. A preacher, a husband, and a father longer than I was not. Wow. This year made it that. Wow. This year. So, I in some ways I have a disproportionate view, and I didn't have some of those experiences, which God knows better than I do. That was what He had for me. But let me talk to young preachers.
Let's do it. Young preachers, listen, Paul. Let's listen.
Cut it out, man. Cut it out. You don't talk like that. Why? Why are you acting like you 45, bro? You a fresh 22.
Fresh.
Listen, blossom in your 22-ness. Yeah. Be able to relate to people in your demographic and stop trying to impress people my age and older. Because let me tell you something. I've been there. We are at 22. I was a novelty. I was cute when I preached. Oh, look at him trying to close like his preacher. Oh, it's all fluff and cotton.
Right. Yeah. Right.
You know, stop. Oh, y'all stop, man. Go on to convention. Hey, Doc, how you doing, Doc? I'm just trying to make it last, and I got to make sure I stay near the cross. Who is you talking to? Be you.
Yeah.
God called you, if he did, in your skin.
Right.
Embrace it. Celebrate it.
Right.
It's cool. Listen, still throw on some J's and jeans sometimes,
Yep.
You ain't don't make your whole wardrobe suits.
Right.
Three-piece.
Three-piece suits,
With
yeah.
5 of them black.
What are we doing? And
Church
I understand sometimes the pressure
Yeah.
that you're under. But I'm telling you, just like with that David story, whatever God is going to call you to, he knows where to find you. You don't have to put yourself on every set and hope to be sitting up closer up on the stage somewhere. God can find you on the usher's row. God can call you and use you from any capacity.
Yeah.
So don't do what I did and exalt the ideal of ministry
Right.
while missing the gravitas, the actual essence of what ministry is.
Yeah.
And if you're confused about what ministry is, as Pastor Maxwell says, when all else fails, read the Bible.
Read the Bible.
Read them.
Look what Jesus did. Live like him. Treat people like Jesus. Jesus didn't put on airs.
Right.
Jesus wasn't trying to impress nobody.
Right.
Jesus was who he was, and he was okay dealing with the poor, the least, the left out, the widows, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, while the religious bigwigs was sitting up on their pulpit stages. He was doing the real work of ministry.
Right.
That's what your
Right.
focus ought to be.
Right. Now, Paul, you're the youngest youngest preacher, I guess, but you've been there what, 2-3 years now?
Yeah,
2-3 years. So, what was
But
it?
Paul old.
Yeah, Paul is old, so
Man.
Paul is old, so. But what was it? So your dad was a preacher, a pastor. You were under Cohen at one point. You were under Maxwell, McFadden, Maxwell. What was it about New Mountain Zion or Pastor Roundtree that, even though he's not gonna like for me to say it that way, but what was it about the package that drew you to New Mountain Zion and made you say, you know what, I could be under his leadership?
Package. Also, want to include Reverend Sam McClendon from New Rising Star. That's where I started at, got baptized, then under McFadden. But I would say the package, it's kind of weird because I didn't necessarily come to New Mount Zion for Pastor Roundtree. Prior to COVID, like I said, I was new to preaching. Very similar story. I got married and did my first sermon the first year at age 22.
I didn't know that.
So I was just trying to get around preachers at that point. I was under the teaching of Dr. Sam Maxwell, under his teaching quite a bit, and I was under the teaching also as Dr. Ball was at Oak Hill for some time as well. So when I first started, Pastor Corn put me teaching Sunday school. That's the way I can have constant study and learn the Bible. So that started at 9:15-ish. The black people never start on time. 9:15-ish. So I was trying to catch 8 o'clock services. In Tampa, it's really only 2 black churches, for real, that I only wanted to go to 8 o'clock. That was Dr. Maxwell at First Baptist Christ Village, and I would come over here and sit in the back. And by the time he got to the cross, I was in my car because I needed to make it over there to Sunday school. But I'm like, but it never really dawned on me to come back and join New Mount Zion because of his preaching, because they was live stream. I can catch it online.
Right.
But I came in because, like I said, I saw a need, and the church I was at, Mount Tabor, Dr. Patterson down in Sarasota, they were still out. So I'm like, let me go and work, and then, once you keep coming, you end up staying. So I've been here ever since. So ever since then, everything has kind of like grew and grown, and I definitely see that this is definitely a church that you can invest in, grow in, and I don't need to necessarily look elsewhere. So it's a lot of growing that I'm doing, and one part I like about this church is that I'm not subject to one particular area of the church.
Right.
So sometimes I'm teaching Bible study. Sometimes I get the privileged opportunity to stand behind a sacred desk. It's been other times I was playing the organ or playing the keyboards.
Yeah.
It's been other times when I've been up in the AV booth.
It's called versatility, people.
Yeah, he's everywhere.
I'm just a humble servant, so I'm just glad I can be used in multiple areas, especially here.
Yeah. You remember when I first took notice of him?
It was at the outside services.
Yeah.
It was like, who is this young man with Tori?
Yes.
Who is this?
Because he just started showing up on the soundboard.
Yeah.
And I would speak to him after service, like, I appreciate you. And Paul is a man of few words. So Paul ain't gonna give you nothing.
Yeah.
He just 2-3 word answer. I'm like, man, I appreciate you coming and helping us out. You welcome. All right then. I guess that's in the conversation. So I kept waiting. I'm like, who is this brother? So I was asking Duran, I'm like, Duran, who is he? He's like, I don't know. He come with Tori. So we finally got his name. I'm like, well, how did he find out? Did he join? What is he doing? Are we paying him? And it just came to find out he saw a need for help on the audiovisual board and started helping out. And the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. He came in quick. We were just talking about this Sunday. A lot of our new preachers have come in and just plug and play.
Running. Yeah.
It's been.
So let me put it in the viewer. Let's switch roles.
All right.
So Duran,
It's the cross on the legs.
I'm waiting for it.
It's my understanding that you've been in ministry for a few years now.
Yes, sir.
And we'd be interested in hearing your story. How were you called into the ministry, and how did it all transpire?
So my story is unique. I get emotional when I talk about it, so y'all bear with me just a minute.
That's why they're wearing the shades.
Yeah, that's really why.
Other than signature.
Yeah, you know. So it had to be 20. When did my mom pass? 2017.
Mm-hmm.
It was either sometime 2016, 2017. I remember sitting in this office, and I was talking to Pastor Roundtree, and I said, "How do you know you're being called to preach?" Growing up, church boy, parents in the communion room, kind of similar to your story. Matter of fact, I remember one time they were setting up communion, and I was hollering in the pulpit, and I didn't know my pastor was there. So he came up and he said, "You all right? I thought somebody was being hurt."
Wow.
I'll never forget that one. All right. So anyway, my mom, she died October 5th of 2017, and I just remember being in the hospital room, like, Lord, whatever you got for me, I'm ready.
I remember that day.
Yeah.
Because y'all called me at like 4-something in the morning, and I missed the call, and then I checked the message. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. That was the day. So her funeral was the following Saturday. I was the last one to give reflections. Now, mind you, I told you I sat here and talked to him. How do you know you're being called to preach? We hadn't really talked about it. He gave, when I say us, he gave all the young preachers, whenever they said they had confessed their call, a homework assignment. Timothy, I can't remember everybody else.
1st, 2nd Timothy, and Titus.
Yes. And so I was giving my reflections, and I ran out of words, and I was getting ready to sit down, and Pastor Roundtree just got up and was like, "Wait a minute, Duran. There's something you're not saying. What did God tell you in that hospital room?" So that kind of confirmed it for me right there. Like, oh, okay, this is real. This is happening. Also, I didn't get that 2-week window. I didn't get a chance to change my mind. Like, make sure this is real. It was, this is what it is. Made it very clear, just because you accept your call, I want to see how you serve. We're not going to put you up to preach. And then I ended up preaching May of 2018. But that was a journey. Being the age I was like 25, 26 at the time, losing my mom, now going into ministry. But I thank God every day, because I didn't realize the leader that I had a very similar story. We don't have to go into that, but just a lot of the pieces, like dad's a deacon, mom deaconess, mom, I think they died at around the same age.
Yeah, 57. My mom was.
Yeah. And so my mom would have been 57 then. Yeah. So it's just like, God don't make no mistakes. God does not make any mistakes whatsoever. Matter of fact, this past Good Friday, I ended up preaching the third saying, "Woman, behold thy son, son, behold thy mother," and I used the my opening was when my mom reached out to your wife. I had no idea this was going on in the background, so God was already ordaining everything, placing everything. All I had to do was just finally step into it and walk into it. Since we own this subject, I might as well, right? Because we can edit it if we need to. Yeah. For the first couple years.
Nervous.
No, don't be nervous. For the first couple years, a lot of people was like, "Oh, you Rountree's bodyguard, and you always with your pastor," and it's like, yes and no, because you don't know the conversations that we had in the office of when he told us he needs people who are there. He's not one of those guys that's just gonna be like, okay, this is a week in advance, I need you here. He's spontaneous. You never know what you're gonna get. So just being there, being able to take him to different preaching engagements, it hasn't been the I don't want to say the foundation, just the main foundation of my ministry, but being with your pastor. Every pastor has told me, stick with your pastor, stick with your pastor, stick with your pastor. And as I'm growing in ministry, I realize, like, they're not just saying that just because, like, there's something behind it. People that you don't even know, your name is being mentioned in closed doors, closed rooms, because you're faithful to not just the ministry, but you're faithful to your leader. Kind of how we opened up the interview process, or the podcast process of talking about Jethro and Moses and Elisha and Elijah.
Jethro me again, yo. Did y'all see what happened? We were so deep and it was so just profound. And he has Jethro, boomerang Jethro back into this thing.
I know you good.
Wow. Brilliant. That was brilliant how you
Appreciate you.
backdoored that back in there.
Appreciate you.
But you know what, but it's absolutely right. Because preachers used to tell me the same thing. When they would see me carrying G-R.E.A.L bag or whatever, they say, I know a lot of preachers gonna call you a flunky, it's do boy, but you serve faithfully. And God, and if and when it's your turn, God will elevate you and place you where he wants you to be.
Yeah.
And so I did. And they did call me that. But I didn't really care because I knew who I was as a person. And to this day, I tell every preacher who comes here, I do not need an armor bearer. I'm not disparaging guys who have them, bless your heart, and I understand the role they play. But I'm talking about for Larry Roundtree. My pride, my heart, my tendency to arrogance and entitlement cannot handle somebody who's at my beck and call. Now, I like to have help, but I don't need you. I'm not going to ask you to call off work to take me somewhere. Now, no, you got a job, go to your job. I'm not going to ask you to interrupt your life for me.
Right.
As much as I appreciate help. And by the same token, even if you offer, I'm probably not going to call. Because if I call, I feel like you're going to inconvenience yourself just to accommodate me.
Right.
And so, like Duran said, I'm much more amenable to, for example, both of these have done this for me. Like, I'll say I'm in revival next week for 3 nights. And they don't ask. They'll say to me, what time you leaving Tuesday? Probably about 5:30. Okay, I'll be there. And they get no opposition from me. They'll come, they'll drive. And when I tell y'all, I am so profoundly grateful, but they can tell you I do not call and ask them. I mean, unless I don't have a ride,
Right.
you know. And so I'm much more helped by people's presence, availability, and willingness rather than a status. Like, you don't need to have a title to help somebody.
Right.
You know, just help.
Right.
You know, so That's what I mean about armor bearer. Some guys can handle it. That ain't for me, you know. I remember one time I went to preach at a church, and had one of the preachers go with me, and when we went into the office of the pastor, the host pastor, he said, "You got an armor bearer?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Well, who carry your Bible?" I said, "I do." "Who pour you water?" "I do." "Who hold your towel?" I said, "I do." He say, "Well, you ain't got no armor bearer." I said, "That's what I told you." You would think I knew what you was talking about. So it's, to each his own.
Yeah.
But also be aware of your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses. I don't need nobody else feeding this ego. I already make it overweight. It need to be on a diet. And so, as much as I love compliments and flattery, I know I can't handle it and be effective at the same time.
Yeah.
So I end up refusing things that I would like to say yes to, just for discipline. Hopefully it helps in some kind of way.
Yeah, God. Dr. Maxwell suggested a book, Leaving for the Second Chair. So since I've been reading that, I realized that I don't need to be always wear a suit and be in the pulpit, because there's so many areas where I can be a faithful servant of the church and don't have to stand behind a sacred desk.
Right.
So I love that book because it helps me understand that church is only about being a preacher, and that's kind of a lot of people just look to I just want to be the pastor, because the pastor gets all the reverence and all the celebration
and the headaches and the hatred and the back talk and the disrespect. But I'm blessed.
Yeah.
But you know what I love about these brothers is they're not just pulpit furniture, and really none of the preachers here are. You'll find them working in various areas. Like, for example, they're working with the young adult ministry. Paul works in audio visual. Deron works with our missions. One of them works in our worship and arts. We got one sings in the choir. Another teaches Bible study. Grief ministry. Yeah, the buses.
Education.
Yeah. Everybody's working and not just waiting for the next opportunity to preach, because it don't come often round at the New Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church.
Better be ready.
Gots to be ready.
Y'all know my training.
Gots to be ready. This goes back, if y'all were listening to N.S. Sanders, Pastor Roundtree adopted one of his lessons, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. You always have to be ready. He always told us, you never know when I'm going to call you. Have your sermon ready and don't go to the car and go get it, because
if it's in the car, stay in the car with it.
Yeah.
He would literally. So our order of service at St. Paul, we would have because back then that mission education offering, then the tithing offering.
Yeah.
So after the second offering, the choir would sing, then they would do a hymn of consecration, and then the preacher.
Yeah.
More times than not, we found out on about the second, third verse of the hymn of consecration that it was on us to preach. And that was a little bit of pre-notice. Sometimes G-R.E.A.L would be up there singing with the choir, "Draw me near." How come Baptist preachers never say all the words? Near.
Listen, don't get me.
Near.
I'll misquote lyrics.
Oh, man.
But anyway, he look at us when because everybody's standing. Everybody be seated, and he look at you and be like, "It's on you." And bro, get your Bible, say your little quick prayer, and get up there and preach.
Yeah.
And you better not get up there talking about, "Well, I just found out I'm preaching, so y'all pray for me."
Yeah.
That would be your Alpha and Omega.
Yeah.
Won't happen again.
Alpha and Omega. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
I love it.
If you're a preacher, if you're a doctor, and and somebody goes into some medical emergency, you ain't got time to read no manual.
No.
You feel me?
Got to have
If
it in
you're a
you.
fireman and a house on fire, you ain't got time to be like, "Man, I need at least 3 days notice before I go put out this fire." Well, we dealing with souls.
Yeah.
That's facts.
And if you've been called, you ought to have the Holy Spirit.
Yes,
And if
sir.
you got the, let me say it like I want to say, you got to have the Holy Ghost.
Yes, sir.
And if you got the Holy Ghost and you've been feeding on His Word, there ought to be something for you to pull on. I don't care if you got to preach John 3:16.
Yeah.
You better preach it like it's the most profound message you've ever preached in your life.
Yes, sir.
But you got to have something
Something.
to preach.
Yeah.
And we get so caught up on the technicalities. Well, I don't have my points that's alliterative, or they don't rhyme, or I don't have my socially relevant introduction, and I don't have my unique and innovative clothes together. Man, you better get up and tell him he died. You know what I'm saying? That's your opening, your middle, and your close.
Yeah.
He died in the early Sunday morning.
That's the gospel.
He got up.
That's the gospel.
Preach.
We can get into a lot of stuff. We get into your celebration, your hooping. We get into your
Which ain't
background.
Can
That's
we
a
talk,
celebration.
Can we talk about this modulation thing that he is
Man.
on right now? Insane.
He went through a couple phases, but yeah.
Oh, you weren't here for that. Yeah, you weren't here for that one, boy. That was. So this is the fun part. This is the part. So
Please
he
pause while we go to our supporters, our sponsors for station identification. I need to get these two brothers together. They get off the chain.
Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead, because I'm gonna piggyback off you. Because
Like I said, we get to celebration. We get into your theology, if you even your theology background, how you kind of grow and develop that. But this is an audience that just want to know about you and your ministry. Where do you see your ministry kind of where it's at right now and where it's going as in the future as God leads?
Man, right now, I'm at a very critical point in ministry. As we stated, you know, I've been preaching for almost a quarter of a century. Pastoring for be 15 years next month, if the Lord allow and the creek don't rise. So while I'm not a seasoned veteran, I'm not a rookie.
not a spring chicken either.
Yeah, well, I didn't say that. I did not say spring chicken. I said rookie.
Yeah, I know. I was just throwing that out there. I'm sorry.
Well,
I apologize.
reel it back in. But you know, it's this unique phase where I still have the energy sometimes that I had in my 20s, but some wisdom that I didn't, and so it's from the outside looking in, it's a very fruitful time. You know, the church is growing, and you know, I'm off preaching all these places, but man, internally, it's a struggle. It really is, because it's this redefining of myself.
Yeah.
You know, I guess maybe putting myself too much in God's position, trying to figure out the future. Like, well, what is next for me?
Yeah.
Is this where I retire from?
Right.
You know, or what do I do? Are we building? Are we gonna be? You know, and so it's a lot of undefined potential. So I mean, quite honestly, I don't know where God is taking me in a ministry sense. I know in a personal sense of godliness, I know that He has been putting me through the furnace of purification. And I know it's preparation, because there's some parts of me today that can't go with me wherever God's taking me. And I'm not saying physically, it may be here,
Right.
but whatever the next phase is, it's got to be a more purified version of who I am today. And so that means I've had to go through some very uncomfortable circumstances and transitional phases in ministry and personally. Every man, we talked about Jethro, I'll bring him back up. Every preacher needs a Jethro, a Paul, Elijah, who can pour into them. But every preacher also needs. For Paul, there was Apollos, or Barnabas or Silas.
Right,
yeah, that's
right.
better. For the disciples, they had each other. You need a contemporary that you can be honest with and accountable to.
David and Jonathan.
Huh?
David and Jonathan.
David and Jonathan. And so Pastor Query is that for me. And we have very similar tracks in ministry. And we get to come together. We have breakfast about weekly and share in a what's the word I said earlier? Non-judgmental environment. The rigors. We're not ungrateful.
Yeah.
We're not bitter. But it's rough sometimes.
Yeah.
And so when you got somebody who understands that, it helps. But then you also need a Timothy. You need an Elisha. You need a Joshua that you can pour into. Because when I get to talk to you all, hopefully it's helpful for you all, but it helps me too. Because I get to see stuff from you all's perspective. And me talking to you all kind of makes everything make sense, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. That's real good. Paul, you got any?
No, I'm getting ready to close.
Anything?
Well, this has been another broadcast of the Ron and Paul. But
There it is.
I'm
Yeah.
done.
Preach, preacher. Well, listen, we appreciate y'all for joining in with us today. Thank you again, Pastor, for.
Thank you. I enjoyed this, brothers. I really did.
I'm glad, and it's picking up steam. This is always that little, when Pastor say I'm done, preacher say I'm done, but they not
Y'all
done.
Baptist preachers. That mean y'all got 3 more closes. Go ahead.
Exactly.
And we don't have the latest to shut us down.
Right. That's what it is. Maya and Jasmine, they used to be, all right, guys, that's enough. That's why we have. I said it before, and I'll say it again. That's why we have women, because they can at least keep things in order.
That's
while
why
we
I have Samir. Because Samir give me that eye in a minute, like, that's enough, brother. Go and sit on down. Yeah.
That's good. That is good. But I lost track of what I was going to say.
You was
That's
about
what
to
I did.
You thought about to plug something.
I wasn't
You gaining
about to
traction.
plug. What was I about to plug?
But I'm Jethro. He can't remember what he's saying, but I'm Jethro.
We got the barbecue.
I'm Moses. I'm 80.
We got the
You
barbecue.
said something about it was gaining traction. With viewers, I guess.
Oh, that's what it was. Yes. Sorry, y'all. I was shocked. When Sister Wardlow. Shout out to Sister Wardlow. I know she's gonna see this.
Number 1.
Yeah. She said, "I love your podcast. Keep doing what y'all are doing. This is a great thing." Sister Priester, she when the young lady joined a couple Sundays ago, she was like, "Yeah, they have a podcast." I said, "Y'all watching the podcast?" So we appreciate y'all, New Mount Zion.
Let me tell y'all something. If Mary Priester don't go to heaven, whatever heaven is, you don't want to be there.
That's true.
She saved.
Save. Catherine Waddell too.
Catherine
She
Waddell.
saved.
Yes, Lord.
We could go down the road.
Y'all better stop calling names.
Right, we gonna get in
I didn't
trouble.
say nothing.
We gonna get in trouble.
I echoed their sentiments. I didn't call no names, except for Samia, and I'll call that one all day. Other than Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
Call 'em. You know what's funny? When I go out to preach now, I steal some things from my pastor. I say,
You're supposed to. It's a whole industry of thieves.
very true. But after I've acknowledged the pastor or whoever, I say, before I call any other names, there's one more name, and the only name I'm gonna call is Jesus. And,
Yes,
just
sir.
go into it.
Yes,
So
sir.
yeah, that's
what they
good.
invited you for.
Yes, sir.
Not to sit there and make acknowledgments and acknowledge dignitaries and all this kind of carrying on. Preach, man.
Preach Jesus, and every time we go out to preach, first thing he says is preach Jesus.
Preach Jesus.
That's it. When we stand here to preach Jesus. But again, thank y'all for joining us on this podcast. Hopefully, this won't be the last time
They
we get.
singing.
They singing. They
Shout out to the
singing.
praise team.
Shout
Y'all
out to the
better.
praise
When they
team.
sing Sunday,
Sunday.
y'all might want to be here Sunday.
Oh wait,
Yeah,
when
that'll come out for
yeah,
Sunday.
we can cut this part, but when
Y'all might want to be here.
Every Sunday.
every
Yeah, every
Sunday, because
Sunday.
you
We
never
got
know.
good choirs.
You never know what you're gonna get.
8 and 11.
We have an order of service, but when the Holy Ghost moves, that goes out the window. But again, Thank y'all for joining us.
Wait. Now I got to close with y'all. So we got to get back where we
Hold
get
on.
close.
I got out of school because I got
when you
another
talking
close.
about cancel? Oh my gosh. Okay.
Nope. Appreciate everybody. Follow us on G-R.E.A.L, NMZ.
Grill finna grill. You hear me?
On Instagram.
And they gonna have some grills in. Ah.
That's what I need to get.
Wow.
No,
That's I
what?
need to get. I do want some. I want some things.
All right, we're moving
See
on.
how-
Facebook. It is Generation Real
Y'all pray.
on Facebook, and email us greal@nmztampa.com.
Can y'all tell who the problem child is?
We'll take topic suggestions. You guys got any questions? If you just want to give us a shout out, we appreciate all that. Thank you for listening. Share. Thank you, Pop. Happy anniversary.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Happy
To
anniversary.
God be the glory.
For all the things.
I'm done. You done?
He is done. I'm done. Now unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ask or think, according to the power that works within us. Be glory. What's the rest of the church? Man, I don't mess that up.
Let me tell y'all something. Make sure your preachers know the word before they get up there trying to do benedictions and making up stuff. Talking about now unto him who is able, E-I-E-I-O. What? And I don't know what hit Paul. The power fell. You ain't seen when Paul?
Yeah.
Paul say, I mean, that thing hit.
Now to him.
Is able to keep you from falling.
You know, because you be
present you
you be
faultless.
mid conversation with a person on the pew because you shaking hands and then Pastor. Now to
I'm
him.
ready to go. Y'all got this yin yang. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I've been to 2 services. Y'all ain't. Now we done sung, we done shouted, we done cried, we done laughed. It's time to go home.
Sometimes we done baptized.
Yeah.
It's just a long Sunday.
Now I can interrupt like the best of.
We appreciate y'all. We'll catch y'all later.
Hey.